discussion, so please feel free to. We're going to talk today about everyone's favorite topic, harassment. We're going to specifically, we want to help you make sure you can understand how to recognize and prevent harassment in the workplace. Make sure you're not accidentally harassing other people. Most people don't intentionally run out and say, hey, how can I make someone's life miserable today, or can I harass? But as leaders, you're held to a higher standard, and so we've got to make sure that you're setting the example for everyone else. So we'll talk more about that. And then how to respond, both how we want employees to respond if they feel like they're being harassed, and how we want you to respond as leaders if someone comes to you with a complaint. So let me first just kind of point out that it's it's challenging for all of us. We all come with our own perceptions of the world, and when we work with people that are different than us, it's hard for our attitudes and bias and prejudice not to get in the way. And sometimes that comes out in different forms. You know, we may tease, we may backbite, we may talk about someone, we may treat them differently. We may badger them, we may harass them, and so it's and we all, like I said, we all come with that package, even us leaders and supervisors. So we have to be aware of our tendencies and biases and such, so that we're careful that we don't bring those things into the workplace. For just a second, I'd like you to think back to a time when you felt humiliated, embarrassed, demeaned, anxious, or afraid. Some of you, that may have been last week or week before. Others, it might have been when you were a young child in elementary school and had to deal with a bully. But think back to that time for just a minute, to when you had that type of a real embarrassing, demeaning situation going on. As you think to that moment, a lot of us can, we bring back memories of times where we've just felt sick to our stomach. Like I mentioned here, you're embarrassed, you're afraid. And could you imagine if you had to come to work every day feeling like that? Well, a lot of people who are going through and experiencing harassment, they suffer that. They feel that every time they walk past a certain person, every time they go into certain environments, they're feeling that humiliation, that anxiety, and the fear. And so this is why it's pretty important to stamp this out. It can have real negative effects on your work environment, not only personal employee engagement, their productivity, but it spreads. The whole environment can be impacted negatively, and bring the company down. So that's why we really need to address it. So let's talk about what harassment is. I know a lot of you have had training on this before, and I think we even talked a little bit about it when I was out on site with you. Seems like it's been a couple of years ago now. But harassment in general is any conduct that's directed at a person that's causing substantial emotional distress. It really serves no legitimate business purpose. And that can come out in a lot of different forms. Let's kind of go through some of these. There's what we may refer to as verbal conduct. Can anyone think of an example of a verbal conduct that may be considered harassment? Quiet group here this morning. No one's speaking out with an example.
I got it. We're in mixed company. I can't use these words.
Let me give you a couple. I'll throw out a couple here for you. So one example might be suggestive comments. So something that's maybe of a discussions of a sexual nature, being flirtatious. Those kinds of things make them maybe sexual flirtation, derogatory jokes. And this is one that's kind of hard because, we all like to have fun at work. We all know a lot of good jokes to tell that are, that may appear really funny to us. But if our joke has to deal with age, religion, national origin, sex, gender, height, weight, those kinds of things, we're potentially hurting someone's feelings and maybe creating a hostile, harassing work environment with our jokes, and we don't even realize it, and we think we're being funny. And someone may actually be standing there in the room with you when you're telling the joke, laughing right along with you, when in reality they're feeling that humility, that fear, that anxiety that we talked about. Name calling, kidding or teasing. And that kind of goes along with that the joke thing. Again, we like to have fun at work. Just make sure it's not at someone else's expense, or that we're, not kidding and teasing on something that's really touching some of those sensitive areas. Anything dealing with someone's health, age, religion, national origin, height, weight, all of those kinds of things can be very offensive to people, and again, be creating this hostile work environment. So just watch that's treading that fine line. I would suggest probably less than more of that kind of thing in the work environment. Obscene language. We talked about this a couple of months ago when we had that discussion. Again, obscene language can come across as offensive to some people, especially certain words, like, for example, dropping the F-bomb, or taking someone's deity in vain, and using. So just choose your words carefully. We talked about this before, that it's better to try and eliminate as many of the swear words as possible. And I know we're in the trucking industry, and it's common. You may hear a few of these words, but as leaders, strive to set a better tone. Strive to come across more polished and professional, and set a better example for the others, and look where you could clean up some of your language. So anything dealing with gender, race, religion, age, all of that is types of example. Discussion of a sexual nature. We talked about that. So leaving out all of those kinds of details and discussions. Harassment could also come in the form of visual conduct. So this may be something like what I'll call leering and gestures. We all have something that's maybe sexually appealing to us. So so an individual walks past, and we may find that person attractive. There's a difference between noticing the person and saying, okay, that person's attractive, turning back and then moving about business, versus leering and glaring and staring, and really watching the person go by, double take, triple take, checking the person out. That's also a form of visual conduct that they notice and others notice that you noticed. And as well as I would mention, making sure that we're careful where our eyes are, that we're not staring at body parts, eye to breast or eye to buttocks or whatever, because like I said, people notice that. Sometimes the individuals who are doing the looking think, oh, I'm just kind of casually having a glance, but people see the nonverbal conduct, and if someone's constantly looking and glaring in those areas, you could be making them comfortable, and others around you as well. Derogatory or sexually oriented posters, pictures, or pornography. These are all forms of harassment. People calling up, bringing up pornography on their computer, or bringing in calendars or pictures or things on their phone or anything like that that they're sharing. I mean, if somebody is interested in that kind of thing, it needs to be out of the workplace. They can't bring that into the workplace, open up pornographic material, and I would add to that even things with like in swimsuit underwear, those kinds of things that's crossing, getting a little too close, that you may be, again, creating this hostile environment. It's just better to keep that kind of thing out of the workplace. If you would like to look at that kind of thing, you want that, do that at home, or again, not at work. So we would ask that you not bring those kinds of things up on your computer or bring them to work. Could even be funny, cartoons, drawings, graffiti, and all of the above. Switching over to physical conduct. So there's a couple of things that are kind of some obvious things here in physical conduct. Obviously, if I assault someone, so if I'm grabbing someone in their private body part areas, not only will I likely be fired, I would also likely be charged with assault and battery and possibly even arrested. So that's some obvious things there. If you're punching somebody, offensive touching, patting, pinching, striking, even blocking someone's movement can all be examples of physical conduct. What are your thoughts about coming up and rubbing someone's shoulders? Is that okay or is that risky?
Don't go there.
Why do you say that?
It's just because you might think it's okay, somebody else might think it's okay, and even the person that you're doing that to might think it's okay, but other people are going to be offended. It's just avoid that appearance.
Yeah, and I would say just to add to that, just use some real extreme caution. This particular area, we're not as worried about third-party harassment as we are, someone just coming up and grabbing someone's neck or saying, "Oh, you look tense. I'm going to be rubbing my hands on the back of your neck now," and just, jumping in. I mean, if you have situations where someone says, "Wow, I have a really stiff neck. Do you mind rubbing my neck?" That's probably okay. Use caution, be careful. Or if someone, but just always have to make sure that it's mutually acceptable between the two individuals. But proceed with caution. What about hugging? How about giving somebody a hug in the workplace? Problem with that?
It's not nearly as bad. I mean, it depends on the nature.
Again, it depends. It's the same type of situational thing. We do have a couple here who it's just their personality to hug. I mean, and it's not intimate at all. It's just, hello, how are you, and that's it. So I think, again, it depends on the situation, but you've got to be really aware of the other person involved. I think that's the key.
I had someone in my office the other day, and she shared some things that were confidential and disturbing and hard for her to talk about, and she shed a few tears. And when we were done, I says, "Can I give you a hug?" And she says, "Yes." And she needed a hug, and I gave her a hug, and it was nice. It was good for her. So it's the kind of thing we have to be careful. We have to make sure that it's mutually acceptable. So there again, someone just going in and grabbing and pulling someone in for the hug, probably not okay. But there's two ways I can check. I can either ask, "Is it okay if I give you a hug?" Or I can do it non-verbally. And you can't see me here, but my hands are out, and I'm in the hugging position, but I stop. So I open up, and so non-verbally I can go hug time, and then you have to read their nonverbal that says, "Okay, it's okay, come on in." But if you get the "don't come in," you're left hanging and do not go in. So it's important to kind of follow those things, but be careful with those things. Another thing that's useful too is the side hug is a little bit more acceptable in those kind of office situations as opposed to the pulling in tight to the chest hug. So you kind of turn to the side a little bit. So just another suggestion. Okay, questions or comments on any of these that we've talked about so far? The physical, the visual, or the verbal conduct types of harassment. Now, the last one I'm going to go into is deals with threats or demands. So here we may have some situation where someone's threatening someone else. Maybe kind of the bully kind of situation. They may be badgering, teasing someone, or say threatening. I'm going to kick your butt. You'll meet me outside. I see you do that again. I'm going to, I had an individual that two salesmen at a company. One salesperson had stolen the other person's sale, and somehow it didn't get worked out well with the company. And every time that other salesperson would walk by the other individual's desk, he would glare him down, stare him down. He was a tough-looking guy. I mean, he's the kind of guy you didn't want to meet in a dark alley. And he would just stare this guy down. He created a hostile work environment just with looks, just by looking at the person. But he was, exhibiting threatening, nonverbal communication. There's two types of what I'll call sexual harassment. There's a quid pro quo, and that's a this for that. And that's where someone in authority might go to another employee and say, "Hey, in exchange for this sexual favor, or let me do this, and I'll make sure that you get that raise or you get that promotion or whatever." We don't see that much of that kind of thing happening in the work environment. Still out there, be careful, that can be a real serious one. And then the other one that's more prevailing is what's called a hostile work environment. And that's doing a lot of those things that we just talked about. You know, if you have a lot of that kind of stuff going on overall in your work environment, you're creating a sexual harassment type environment. You have a lot of discussions of sex. You have a lot of, if you allow pornography and those kinds of things going on in the workplace, and et cetera. Generally, to be considered sexual harassment has to be sufficiently severe, pervasive, you know, to create this hostile work environment. And like I said, it could be dealing with someone's age, religion, national origin, you know, any of those kinds of things, you know, we really need to stay away from. Obviously, if it's going to be sexual harassment, it would do dealing with sex. So here's kind of a test of appropriateness. You know, just ask yourself, would I say or do this if my spouse, mother, or child were here? For some of you, priest, pastor, or bishop, or whatever it may be, you know, that fits for that. If the answer is no, probably better to leave it out of the work environment too. You know, and as I mentioned, you're the supervisors and the leaders, so you really need to set the tone and set the example and kind of raise the bar there with your behavior, because others are going to follow what you do and say. All right, so question, is it harassment if the alleged harasser had good intentions? Does it matter what their intentions are? So this guy, Joe, just a friendly guy. Everyone he sees, he greets them with a hug. When he sees women, he comes up, he puts his arm around them, he starts rubbing their shoulders and their neck. He's just a nice guy. It's just the way he shows himself. Could it still be harassment if he didn't intend it to be? Yeah, it could. It could be, and so what we have to do with those individuals is train them how to express themselves better, or train them so, like the things I talked about with the rubbing shoulders or the hugs, train them to okay, you know, if they're going to do that kind of thing. I used to train, I'd say handshakes and high fives are the only way to go in workplaces anymore, but you know, sometimes a hug of celebration or a hug of a greeting is needed and is okay. You just have to make sure that, you know, that it's mutually agreed to by both parties. All right, so ask yourself, you know, could you be contributing to a potential harassment environment by your actions or your words? You know, we need to personalize this and take it back to you. Are you aware of harassing type behaviors that we've talked about that's going on with some of your coworkers or employees? And then let's talk about, we'll come back to that in a minute, because you know, we want you to take some actions to help, you know, prevent harassment in the work environment. But I just kind of want to emphasize your policy, as you know, the company will not tolerate any sort of harassment. So whether it's based on age, religion, gender, national origin, sex, disability, or other protected characteristics, it's strictly prohibited. And the company will take corrective action up to and including termination of employment. And it kind of depends on the circumstances. You know, if someone's just doing a little teasing or a little inappropriate jokes, maybe it's just having a discussion saying, hey, that's contrary to our policy, please don't, you know, bring that kind of joke in the environment. If someone's stalking or touching or those kinds of things, they'll probably be terminated on the spot. You know, so we kind of let the punishment fit the crime. Reminder, we don't like terminations on the spot. So if you're involved in a situation where you're finding that, you know, someone is harassing, you know, we'll talk about this further in a minute, but we want you to gather the information and then come bring it back to Rasa and Chuck and the team, and we'll kind of decide next steps from, and we'll come to that in just a moment. All right, so what do you do if you see or experience harassment? One of the things we want people to feel empowered to do is confront it. If they want them to confront, discuss it, wills, and seek to resolve it, if they, you know, if they're comfortable doing that. Just for example, if someone's asking someone else out on a date, and they keep asking someone out, and they've said no, or they keep flirting with them at work, we'd encourage them to say, hey, you've asked me out twice. I don't take this personal, but I'm not interested in you in that way. Please don't ask me out anymore. I mean, if they're comfortable doing that kind of thing, we encourage it. If they're not, then at any time we want them to report to their supervisor or any member of senior management or to HR, who is RASA. So if at any point you personally are experiencing that, or employees will be, hopefully be coming to you and reporting it, we'll go through your response in just a moment. And make sure that we encourage people to keep the facts. Who did what, were there witnesses, what did they say, when did it happen, that kind of thing. Rasa, let me ask you, have I mentioned is this in agreement with everything that is your policy and your practice?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not off on anything there. We do, anyone that's feeling bullied or threatened, we don't encourage them to try and resolve that one on their own. That may just escalate and make things worse. So if somebody's being bullied or threatened, we want them to just come right into their supervisor or someone in senior management or to RASA. Reporting methods can be in writing, in person, or even through a friend. We don't like it to be anonymous. It's really hard. We just can't respond to anonymous. So we really need, we want, if it's happening to one individual, it's probably happening to others. So we really need people to step forward and be open and confront. And we keep things on a confidential basis. And this, I can't emphasize this enough with you, because you're the critical role here as the supervisors, that you employees may come to you and information. Sometimes they come into your room and they say, hey, I want to tell you about something, but I don't want anyone to know. Now at that point, just immediately we want you to say, I will keep things as confidential as possible on a need-to-know only basis, but I cannot promise, complete anonymity. I have to, if something's happening to you as an organization, we have to take steps to eliminate it, and then let them talk and ask questions and and get the information from there. Well, all reported violations will be investigated, and immediate action will be taken to eliminate the risk. There should be no retaliation. So no retaliation against the employee who complains or those who may be involved in the investigation. And this is important for you to help with. Make sure that you're not treating any of those people differently in any way, whether it's in performance reviews, pay reviews, time off, training, moving them from one office to another, or somehow treating them differently, as well as not let others treat. It's important all along the way. So the goal here, we want to create this work environment with mutual respect, where everyone, we don't care if everyone likes each other, but we want them to be respectful and work well together. So here I'm going to switch gears here for our last little bit of our discussion here. Leader's role in preventing harassment. What are some of the things you need to do to help make sure this isn't happening?
Maybe talk to individuals if you see something like that.
Yeah, so if you notice someone that's maybe crossing some of these lines, now that you have a good awareness of what harassment is, if you see someone that's bordering the lines, confronting them and talking to them about it. What else?
Don't do it ourselves.
Yeah, being above reproach yourself.
There you go. Yeah, be an example. Make sure that you're setting the right tone. It's also important to be approachable. Because if somebody's having something that's going on and they're not comfortable coming into you, they're not going to talk to you, and they may let it fester, or they may not get it resolved, and so make sure you're approachable. And that's a whole discussion in of itself. But leaving your door open, encourage being the kind of person when someone comes into you that you listen, ask questions, don't act annoyed or act like they're distracting you or taking you away from something. So Well, make sure that you establish and communicate and model the clear expectations. So help new employees understand what harassment is and that won't be tolerated. It's in your handbook. Might be a good thing when you get a new person on board to just kind of emphasize that one. That's one of them that's good to discuss when somebody comes on board. Monitor the work environment too. Management by walking around, being out there, being around the folks. Look for that nonverbal communication that's going on. You can tell if somebody's disturbed. You can tell if there's conflict between two individuals. And maybe pull them aside in confidence and separate one by one and say, hey, it seems there was a little tension between you and Joe. What's going on? Or, hey, you seem like you were a little uncomfortable today. Is everything okay? Just ask probing questions. You don't have to assume or dive into too much, but by seeing that nonverbal and then responding to that, you can help with the environment. Take corrective action, reinforcement. So we mentioned that if you see someone that's crossing the lines, and if they're crossing it too far, if it looks like it's a serious thing, so I say too far. If it's more than just jokes or little teasing, those kinds of things, I'd say just kind of confront and coach them and say, hey, please don't do that anymore. You might even need to, it's probably a good idea to document that even if you see those kinds of things happening. But the more serious kinds of things, if somebody comes in and reports to you, we want you to take that immediately to RASA. We talked about this, I believe it was briefly, but so if someone comes to you with a complaint about harassment, they may not say, hey, I'm being harassed. So they'll come in and say, so-and-so keeps asking me out, or so-and-so's teasing me, or I'm feeling threatened by this person. When you get those kinds of things, ask questions, gather the information, take notes, listen, do it all in confidence. Don't tell anyone else. There's no reason to talk to other supervisors. There's no reason to talk to other employees, but we do want you to bring it into RASA and Chuck, and then they'll decide next steps from there, whether we need to do an investigation or what the actions might be. So your role as supervisors is just to be approachable, listen, gather the facts, and then take it back to the senior management. You may be involved in the investigation, you may be involved in next steps, but they just want to pull it back in, get a whole group perspective on it. That may even be something they call us on to. Rasa, anything else you would add to that?
No, I think you've done a good job.
Okay. All right, so if you are involved in investigation, we need to make sure we're getting the facts. I won't go in. We just have to make sure that we're only talking to individuals that have relevant information or witness, and that kind of thing. Everyone that we talk to, we need to make sure that we're asking them to keep this confidential, and that that we do not want them talking to anyone else. In fact, I get an agreement from them. I say, do I have your agreement that you will keep this confidential, that you will not speak about this with other people? And and I'll wait for them to say it. Because that's important to control the rumor mills and other things and help them understand why that's important. We don't want to create a negative environment. We don't want to hurt this situation more than it is. But, you can understand we just needed to get the information. So we're controlling the rumor mill, make sure we're not, there's no retaliation going on. And bottom line is, as leaders and supervisors, you're building the team. Build people that respect each other. And that, so these best friends. But we do need to eliminate the conflicts. We need to eliminate any of the badgering, teasing, backbiting that leads to a negative overall work environment and such. And just keep in mind as well, take all reports seriously. So if someone comes to you and don't casually, here's a scenario where you're guaranteed you're going to get sued. Someone comes to you and says, so-and-so keeps asking me out, they're flirting with me, and you say, oh, that's just the way they are, don't worry about it. And then they quit and they go get an attorney and sue you. Those kinds of things can result in hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of dollar lawsuits. So we just really have to take it serious. Find a place to discuss the situation in confidence, gather the basic facts, who did what when, notify senior management. So that's kind of the approach, and then from there they'll jointly plan out an investigation and next steps from there. So keep in mind you're held to a higher standard than other employees. So really set that tone and that example of being mutually respectful to other people and showing common courtesy. Don't date or pursue sexual relations with employees who report to you. As a general rule, it's probably not a good idea to do that with anyone in your work environment, but especially those who report directly to you. If that type of relationship has developed, then bring it forward to RASA, and then they'll discuss how to make some changes and whatever to where we don't have those kinds of conflicts or problems. Create rapport with employees so they're comfortable coming to you. And then make sure that we're protecting the employee's privacy. So if you hear information and someone's come to you, I just emphasize again, keep it confidential. Don't tell other coworkers. Don't tell other supervisors. Only bring it to RASA and Chuck and work on it and resolve it together. Okay? Any other questions or comments about, so that's our discussion today on preventing harassment in the workplace, and we've talked about your role as not only understanding the work environment, helping reinforce it, being approachable, and handling it correctly if someone comes to you. Any other questions or comments?
I think we're good.
Great.
Appreciate it, Ken. Thanks.